Hi, everyone. I'm Pax Baptiste, the Associate State Director for Outreach and Advocacy in the Triangle region. And we are so excited to have our Triangle Talks event this week focused on fraud. As many of you know, October is Cybercrime Awareness Month, and we just want to continue to do our part to ensure that older Americans are staying as informed as possible with all of the current scams and fraudulent activities that aim to take advantage of folks. So Scott Buell, one of our Triangle volunteers, is going to be moderating our conversation today. And Scott, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Pax. Welcome to everyone. I do want to remind you that we are going to record this, and you can, if you want to go back for a refresher session, you can go back and watch it again, or you can tell all your friends and relatives that they should watch this and be prepared for protecting themselves against fraudulent activity. I'm happy to welcome two of my AARP colleagues with us today. They are both area experts in fraud and computer fraud, cyber activities. Joining me is with David Kirkman, is a former Special Deputy Attorney General with the North Carolina Department of Justice. From 1987 until 2017, he served as an enforcement attorney in the department's Consumer Protection Division, where he was made a name for himself by bringing elder fraud cases and creating and managing the department's elder fraud unit. Now that he's retired from the state and working with AARP, David volunteers with AARP in North Carolina, the Chatham County Council on Aging, and the North Carolina Conference on District Attorneys. He recently published a book entitled Elder Fraud Wars, Case Histories from an Enforcement Attorney, our commercial plug. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Phil Bowen. Phil is a longtime AARP North Carolina legislative advocate and is actively working on issues important to older adults in North Carolina. One of the key focus areas is helping seniors learn how to combat fraud. He's also a Cary Senior Technical Education Group instructor at the Town of Cary Senior Center, where he teaches classes on how to successfully and safely use social media tools and protect your online identity. Phil is an IBM retiree, having last worked in software and cloud management. So welcome, gentlemen. Appreciate
Thank you, Scott,
joining us today.
Thanks.
I'm going to be asking some questions, and it's kind of a round robin thing, and I'll start off with Dave. In your book, you write about the elderly fraud industry. Just what is the elder fraud industry, and where is it based?
It's a fairly new phenomenon. It started back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's comprised of a lot of these scammers we've been talking about for months and even years. People like home repair scammers, driveway paving scammers, sweepstakes fraud con artists, people who do the grandparent scams, the tech support scams, and also the IRS agent scams. Just about all of these are members of the wide multi-billion-dollar elder fraud industry that we talk about in the book. And a lot of them, they're based in particular countries. They seem to have a certain niche that they follow, and certain criminal groups seem to be controlling them. But they're all very effective in targeting older adults here in the US and around the world with all types of scams and exploiting certain age-related vulnerabilities.
Is the elder fraud industry behind any of the frauds and scams that we've been hearing about in recent months, like the IRS call scams and such?
Absolutely. They've really been gearing up during this pandemic to exploit the fact that a lot of older adults are, they're at home, they don't have any support network, their friends aren't coming over, they're not going out as much, and there's a lot of isolation. And isolation and loneliness are one of the 12 vulnerabilities to elder fraud that we talk about in my book. And so in addition, all of these groups, except for the face-to-face scammers like the home repair guys and the driveway paving guys, use a lot of technology that's come available during the last couple of decades. And so it's usually, that's the portal they get you by. It's through the telephone, over the internet, especially through direct emails.
And I would imagine that a lot of the older adults are getting more technically savvy as they want to talk to their grandchildren and things like that. So they're becoming more vulnerable by that.
They are.
Thank you. Phil, in your experience with cyber safety and password and virus protection, how can older adults best protect themselves online?
Well, the big area that I see a lot of going on right now is the fact that more and more older adults are using smartphones. That has really become sort of the method that older adults are taking in communicating with their children, with their grandchildren, and getting online. And the first recommendation I always make, and it always amazes me when I teach classes on this, how few people still have password protected smartphones. A lot, your life today is on your smartphone, and you need to have it password protected. There's so many easy ways to do it now. There's fingerprint scanners, there's facial recognition. So everybody should immediately make sure that their smartphone is password protected. Second is virus protection. There's virus protection available for your smartphone, for your tablet, for your laptop. Install it. Most of them don't cost very much, maybe $100 a year, something like that. It's well worth it to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And then third is passwords. We have access to so many systems nowadays, and so many of them require passwords, and it gets to be very challenging, but very necessary to put strong passwords, or even passphrases, what we call passphrases, a couple of words that you could use that help remember what that password is for that site or whatever. The other area around that is potentially using a password manager. Password managers have become very popular nowadays because people access so many passwords that I use a tool called LastPass. And LastPass is a password manager, so you only have to remember one password, and that's the password for your LastPass site. And then it will keep track of your passwords on all your other systems that you use. So, passwords, virus protection are really sort of the first line of defense in cybersecurity.
Well, how can you prevent hackers from committing fraud with the information on a computer or smartphone? Say they've got access to it in the past, or they get access to it while you're conducting a transaction.
Well, in addition to what we just talked about, the big thing that we recommend is making sure that you have the most up-to-date software on any device you're using. All the software makers are constantly monitoring their software for hackers. How did a hacker get into your software on your phone or on your tablet or your laptop? And they're constantly updating their software to protect you from, vulnerabilities that they found. So always make sure your software on all your systems is as up to date as possible. The other thing that sounds sort of different is when you are not using your computer, turn it off. And a lot of people always say, oh, I don't want to turn it off and turn it back on. It takes too long. But hackers can get into your system when you're not using it. As long as it's attached to the internet, hackers go out and they're trying to find computers that are available that they can get into. When you're not using your computer, you just turn it off, then they can't do that. So it really helps you keep the hackers at bay, because if you're on your computer and they're trying to hack it, a lot of times you'll see something strange and that will be a clue. So if it's turned off when you're not using it, then they can't get into it. And then third, always make sure that you're updating and backing up the data you have on your computer. Back up your data regularly to the cloud, to a external hard drive device that you unplug when you're not using it. A lot of these hackers nowadays are coming in and they're trying to make your system unusable and then trying to get you to pay them to make it, usable again. And if you back up your data regularly, once a week, once every couple of weeks, either to the cloud or an external device, that protects you from, hackers trying to, destroy your data and not making it usable. So there's a lot of ways to protect yourself from hackers, and you just need to make it more difficult for them to hack you than somebody else, and they'll leave you alone.
Very, very good advice there. Thanks, Phil. Back to Dave. What sort of scams have been targeting older Americans since this wonderful COVID-19 pandemic began?
Well, according to reports from the federal government and also the North Carolina Attorney General's office, the sweetheart scam has become particularly bad this year ever since the spring. And that sort of makes sense because of the isolation we talked about earlier. And a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s are looking for a social life, and they're going on these websites and trying to meet people. And they're getting conned via the sweetheart scam. Another one that's really hot is the grandparent scam. And again, this is partly from the same phenomenon. People are isolated. They're not seeing their grandchildren as much or hearing from them quite as much. And so it makes them even more vulnerable to a sudden call from a grandchild who they haven't kept as good a track of recently, who says, "Oh, I've been arrested in Cancun, Mexico. I'm on vacation." Or I've been arrested in Durham, North Carolina. I need bail money. I need you to wire this money to this address right away. So that's happening a lot as well. These scams where people are, just isolated and much more vulnerable than they were before the pandemic even began.
We've got a couple of questions that have come in from the chat lines here. One is, my spam or scam calls have increased since COVID-19, even when I blocked the number. How effective is the do not call registry? And I believe there was some recent legislation that pulled in the telecom companies to help in the battle of these spam calls. This is a toss-up to Dave or Phil.
I'll start. I sued more telemarketers than probably any assistant attorney general in the country, and got, in some cases, multi-million-dollar verdicts. And those verdicts were effective against real companies, but against criminals, which all these people we're talking about, all these scam artists are criminals, and they're based overseas. They don't care about the do not call registry law. And so that's how you can often tell that something's a scam. If you're getting a pre-recorded call, it's typically going to be a scam. If you're on a do not call registry and they call you anyway saying they've got this wonderful device that Medicare is going to pay for, that's not a legitimate company at all. That's somebody overseas that's calling to scam you. And so the do not call registry, while it doesn't protect you against these criminals overseas, it alerts you to the fact that if they're calling, they're bound to be criminals. So hang up right away.
Good advice, Phil.
And blocking numbers is fairly ineffective nowadays, because what the scam artists are doing is they're creating fake numbers. So you'll see a number on your phone. I see them regularly, and say they're from North Carolina, but these guys are from Thailand, and they're just faking the phone number. So you can block a number, and the next day you'll get a call from the same place, but it'll be a different number. So that, my advice, and I know this is very hard for seniors, we've been educated to answer the phone. My advice has always been, do not answer the phone. If it's somebody that really wants to talk to you, they'll leave you a message, but just don't answer. I know that's hard. I really do. But my advice to people is don't answer the phone at all.
Yes. That's,
the part of your question about the legislation and the regulatory changes, there has been a big push by state attorneys general and the federal government to get the phone companies to actually utilize technology that's out there that can spot all these robocalls and other peculiar calls coming in by the hundreds of thousands per hour or millions per hour from outside countries. And the technology does exist, and it has been used effectively to block out spam emails. And it can be used in the telecommunications industry as well. So this is starting to show some promise. And if you have an account with a particular phone company, you should ask them, what sort of protections do you offer against spam phone calls? These robocalls.
Not every spam call is necessarily a scam, but it's annoying nonetheless on that.
Yes.
Got another question from the chat line. Instead of turning your computer off, if you put it to sleep overnight, does that prevent hackers from getting into your system?
The answer on that one is it depends. And by that, I mean, there are options you can set up in your settings on most computers. And it depends on your computer, and it depends on if you actually do the settings. On my computer, I have it set up so that when my computer goes to sleep, it disconnects from the network. So if your computer has that option, then yes, you could conceivably just let it go to sleep and it would automatically disconnect from the network, which is effectively turning it off. But it tends to be something that people have to go out and do themselves. They have to go check their settings, see if that option is available, and then click it on. If that option is not available, then just letting it go to sleep it does not help you, because it continues to stay connected to the network even if it's asleep.
And the other thing on that is, many times when you upgrade operating systems, you have to go back in and reset some of those settings there too. So that's just a warning on that if you go that route.
Yep.
Okay, let's get back to some of our questions here. This one's for Phil. We had an AARP associate member here recently had their Amazon account hacked, and an order was placed for $2,000 worth of office furniture. What tips can you provide to best monitor those accounts and when you're ordering online?
Well, the first thing everybody should do, and particularly now that everybody's going online more and more and you can't even go to your bank, is make sure that your bank and your credit card accounts are available online and that you can check them. I tend to check mine every couple of days. You can also find out, in most banks and most credit card firms now provide a notification service. My bank, if a strange something shows up on my credit card or my bank statement, they will notify me that when it immediately shows up, and they will a lot of times just call me and say, "Did you really make this?" So you can set up notifications with your bank and your credit card. The other thing you want to do for lots of different websites, Amazon being one, is take advantage of what's called two-factor authentication. And what that means is, not only when you log into your account with your password, and your hopefully a very strong password, but you then also have it set up so that when you log in, they also will send a code to your phone saying, enter this code on the website to validate that this is really you. And I have, on all of my bank, all of my major websites like Amazon that I have set up, the first time I log in, after I've been off for a while, after I've been logged off, I have to do the two-factor authentication. So I log in, and then they send a code to my phone, which I then also have to enter. So that just makes it more difficult for people to hack into your system, because it's really a two-step process to get in versus the one step with just a password.
Right, and they have to have some device, either an email or a phone that they would be able to call you back on. The other thing that you talked about there, and I want to hit upon this, is that I know I have some family members that, I don't want to go in and sign up online for my bank account. I don't want to do online banking and things. And it's very important that, especially for the elderly, that somebody goes in there and sets up their account so that it can be for two-step verification, even if they never use it. But that prevents somebody else from going in and establishing their own identity on that account.
Right. I mean, make sure that, one of the big scams that we talk about is impersonation. People impersonating other people to get in, to their accounts. So absolutely.
Continuing on, Phil, during the COVID pandemic, Americans are spending much more time online. I know I am, on social media, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. I mean, it goes on and on. Next door is another social media, Craigslist. How do you suggest protecting yourself from scammers on social accounts?
Well, the big thing that I talk about in all my classes is a couple of things. First of all, think before you post. Anytime you're posting on Nextdoor, Facebook, any site, think about what you're posting and what the potential implications of that post are. Privacy is a challenge today. I mean, it's just very difficult to maintain our privacy. And so what you post on social media sites is going to, have ramifications far beyond, what you're posting right this minute. I mean, stuff stays on social media forever. So you have to keep that in mind. The other thing is that there are a lot of what we call phishing scams out there now. And that's when you're on a social media site, other people may not care what you're posting there, but it gives them an opening to maybe send you an email saying, we saw you on your Facebook page, and your Facebook account's about to expire. You need to click on this link to make sure your Facebook page doesn't expire. And then they give you a link in that email. Never click on links in emails, particularly ones where that says you haven't paid your LinkedIn account, this month, or your email account or whatever. Never click on links in emails. If you think that there's something wrong with one of your social media accounts, go to the account directly. Don't try to get through it through a link in an email. That's almost, guaranteed. Or the other part of that is they'll take a picture that you've posted maybe on Instagram or on Facebook, and they'll put it in an email and say, oh, we saw this picture of you, who is that friend with you? And, don't click on any attachments, particularly pictures or files or website, anything that's in an email, even if it looks like it's from somebody people are trying to impersonate other people on Facebook all the time. So the other one you get a lot is, people will get hacked, and you'll get an email or a Facebook notification from somebody saying, why don't we go do something together? Again, be very careful if you haven't heard from this person in years and suddenly you get a message from them on Facebook or Instagram. Be very careful that that's probably not really them. It's probably somebody impersonating them. So the issue is just don't click on stuff you don't know who it's coming from, and think before you post.
David, maybe you can further expand upon that. What are some of the signs that calls or emails might be fraudulent? What are some of the other signs?
Well, again, anytime you get a robocall just out of the blue, you can assume it's a scam. If you have something that could be a text or an email, say you've won, click here. I got one of those from Amazon yesterday telling me I'd won an Apple iPad. And I know exactly what would happen as soon as I clicked that link. My phone would be infested with malware, and my personal information would be stolen. So those sorts of things that you have to worry about. I've actually seen a demonstration of the dark web where you can find pages where people sell information that's been gleaned from your postings on LinkedIn or Facebook. things you bought from legitimate companies. It's very, very scary what's actually out there. So that's why I would second what Phil just said about being extremely careful what you put out there, because it's being sold, it's being exchanged, and these Russian mobsters who run the grandparent scam and some of the sweetheart scams, they use that information. So do other scammers based all around the world. So just be very careful. Anything you link. In fact, don't click at all is my main warning to people. If something tells you it's a little scary or it's iffy, listen to that little voice in the back of your head and don't do it.
So what concerns you most specifically about elder fraud and senior scams during this pandemic? I mean, we're isolated. Many seniors are using technology more while maybe not understanding it as much as they should. How can we best address those concerns?
I think one of the best ways we can address it is through events like this, but also everybody listening and watching, try to make extra efforts to maintain as much contact as you can with your older relatives and loved ones and friends and congregation members, because you're their support network, and a strong support network and interaction, with your support network protects you against the fraud industry. Because as we discussed earlier, they're hunting in on the loneliness and the isolation that a lot of people are experiencing because of this pandemic right now.
I'll ask Pax now if there have been any questions that have come in from the chat feed that we can address now. And not hearing any, I guess I'll go with a couple of toss-up questions here for both of our panelists here. You can raise your hands to see who wants to address these. How can older adults get assistance if they suspect that they are a victim of fraud?
Well, I'll give a pitch from my old office, the North Carolina Attorney General's Office Consumer Protection Division. You can contact them or online or via the telephone, 919-716-6000, to talk to them about what you suspect might have been a fraud, or if you've actually been defrauded or scammed, and they will tell you what to do. They have specialists in each of these different areas that we've talked about who can provide advice for you. And then there's also some good resources available through AARP, which I'll let Phil shot at.
Sure. The AARP has the AARP Fraud Watch Network. It's a website, has enormous amounts of educational information. I mean, basically takes what we've talked about and expands it hugely. So great place to go to the Fraud Watch Network, and they have a toll-free number you can call to report. I was just looking this morning, and they're averaging over 6,000 calls a month to the AARP Fraud Watch Network. So it is definitely a good resource to help you figure it out. If the Attorney General's office or the AARP Fraud Watch Network is not what you want to do, you can call your local police department. And a lot of police departments are, doing, helping with fraud. So either online fraud or door-to-door fraud. Don't be afraid to call your local police department and report it and ask for help.
You can also get alerts from the AARP Fraud Network on your telephone about the latest scams. Like I got one right here talking about the tech support scam just going crazy during the pandemic. So, and this is a wonderful way to link into the whole network on the internet and see what other scams are out there.
And if you want to find that, look at what's available through the AARP network, you can go to www.aarp.org/money and then click on the scams and fraud tab. And there's a whole world of information about what scams are going on, what scams are going on in your particular local community. So it can be very helpful there. Well, gentlemen, we are about out of time. I'd like to ask each one of you to give maybe a closing statement and go from there. Phil, we'll start with you.
Okay. Fraud is increasing, and the amount of money people are losing from fraud is only going to go up. So my objective and your objective should be to make it more difficult for fraudsters to scam you than somebody else. They're doing this for a living, and so they're going, but they want to go after the easy pickings. So make it hard for them, and they will go somewhere else than come after you.
David? Did David go off?
But what they really are organized criminals, members of some pretty nasty organizations. They're extremely sophisticated, very tech savvy, and just being cautious is not enough. And that's why earlier I said, hang up the phone, click off the email, click off the notice you get, the text message from one of these people, because every second you spend communicating with them is going to make it that much more likely they're going to scam you. So hang up the phone, click off the internet, click off the email.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you greatly for your time and wonderful information that we can use personally, and we can help look after our loved ones and make certain that they are protecting themselves as much as possible. Pax, do you have anything to add here as we close out?
No, just that was really great information. I know we've gotten a lot of positive feedback in our chat from folks that found what both you, Dave, and you, Phil, had to say very valuable. So thank you so much for your time. And we hope to do it again soon.
And I would like to end this as finally saying, if you or your organization would like some more detailed training on fraud prevention, contact your state AARP office through the contact list on states.aarp.org/North-Carolina, and then go to the contacts there. There may be other easier ways of finding out the contact number, but you can give our PAX a call, or any of our associate directors in the AARP organization in the state, and they will set you up with experts to customize a presentation to your group. They're all familiar with how to use Zoom, so we can do it remote distancing, and if and when we ever get back into the real world of contact, we can do it that way too. So so with that, we'll sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
So long.